Good afternoon. I'm Patrick Simpson. For this discussion, of course, we will look at the paper defense of the topic we chose for this course. The topic that I had chosen was to look at the relation between business and labor during the Gilded Age, to look specifically at what life was like for the worker, to look at their working conditions, and even more importantly, to look at the wages that they had earned. Did these workers truly make a living wage? Did they make enough to truly support themselves and their families? To look at why labor really was so determined to destroy these unions, why labor felt the need to strike, and why these strikes became so violent. But of course, the important things were these strikes in the end effective. So the research question being addressed is, were these strikes effective, both in the short term and the long term? Did these strikes really make a difference? Did they truly improve the working conditions? And again, more importantly, did they improve the wages of the workers? So the significance of the research is to really understand that relationship between business and labor. What was really the purpose of the strikes? Why did these strikes become so violent? To understand better what life and was like for the worker, kind of even inside and outside the factory. Did they truly earn enough for them and their family to survive on? It was also understand, as part of the significance, understand was why was union so determined to destroy labor unions. So the significance is to gain that better understanding of what business and labor was like, what the strikes were, the strikes effective. For the key primary sources, regrettably, some of the papers that I tried to access, um, you just could not. They had never been digitalized. So I'd rely more, especially on newspapers, articles, to get kind of the eyewitness accounts of the strikes, why, the violence that came with the strikes, what was life like for the workers, how much money were they being paid, and so on. Relied a fair amount on autobiographies and memoirs. Of course, the big thing for Pullman was the United States Strike Commission, which provided a fair amount of information about the why there was a call for a strike and why it was so violent. Um, as for the summation of the research findings, uh, ultimately, in the short term, these strikes do not work. In the case of both Homestead and Pullman, um, through the use of strike breakers, through the use of court injunctions, through the use of even the calling in the army and the Pinkertons, the corporations were able to break the strikes and destroyed the unions. And you would not see unionization in the steel industry or the railroad industry for a few decades. It is a disaster in the short term for labor. Those workers who eventually were allowed to go back to work, the vast majority of them were fired. Many of them could not find jobs because they had been blacklisted. If they did, they had to do so under assumed names. Um, they went back. A lot of times, their wages would be cut drastically. Their hours may have been increased. Shifts, became longer. And so, in the short term, yes, the strikes were indeed a failure. They were not effective. However, in the longer terms, you do see more success. Um, these strikes, really woke the people up. And when you start moving into the progressive eras, these strikes did help launch the progressive era. That need of reform in the country, well, a lot of that reform did include labor, that there had to be better wages, there had to be better working conditions. And the strikes did eventually help lead to a lot of this, but only in the long term. And you see advances made in progressive era. You see this even play out all the way in through the 1930s New Deal. So in the long term, there is success, but in the short term, the strikes really were just a disaster for the labor. But anyway, that was pretty much my topic. Anyway, thank you so much for listening, and everyone have a great day.